Welcome to the HMO Success Podcast. I'm your host, Wendy Whitaker-Large, and I'm here to help you create a profitable HMO portfolio. Whether you're a brand new investor or you've been at it for a number of years, my podcast is here to help you make the most from your business, whether that is starting up, scaling, or systemizing. Please hit the subscribe button to make sure you never miss an episode. And if you've got an awe-inspiring project, an inspirational investing story, or a unique approach to HMOs, I'd love to hear from you. Hello, everybody. It's great to welcome you to another HMO Success Podcast. And in this particular episode, we're going to do a bit of a deep dive into interior design. This is an area which I know adds huge value to any property development, including HMOs. And I'm not an expert on interiors. I have to learn from other experts. So I'm really pleased today to have a special webinar guest who is an expert in interior design and can certainly help all of us to create much better interiors for our properties, whether that's an HMO or a development that you might be undertaking. So very big welcome to Gabriel Avramoaica today. It's lovely to have you on, Gabriel. We actually met a few months ago, didn't we? Or in fact, It was probably over a year ago now at a networking meeting down in Milton Keynes.
Yeah, late last year in Milton Keynes. Yeah. Thank you for having me, Wendy. Yeah.
You're very welcome, Gabriel. So now I wanted to invite you on because what we try and do is cover lots of different topics that are relevant to people who are investing in HMOs. And I think when you're first starting off investing in HMOs, it can feel like there's loads to learn. You know, you've got a lot of legislation to learn, you've got lots of regulation to understand, and you've also still got to manage the builder. You've got to find the right property. You've got to sort out your finances. You know, there's an awful lot to kind of piece together. It's definitely more complicated than, you know, just building a single buy-to-let portfolio. But your specialism is in industrial design and interior design. So tell me, how do you think that kind of specialism has helped you create some amazing HMOs?
Yeah. So originally, I studied for 8 years, which is industrial design, which covers 3 different aspects. It's product design, and graphic, and interior design. So interior design, it's quite technical before coming aesthetically pleasing. So each building, it should look from the functional point of view. And then so that aspects it really starts early on in the process. Once we have drawings from the architect, we should look at space planning, and then thinking a bit backwards, thinking, okay, who's going to use this room, this building, this flat, or this house, and then to make sure that space planning it's met it's early on in the process. So then I started with that consumer in mind, whoever's going to rent or buy, and then making sure that looking at 2D plans, it's correct for that user. So then we go and starting building up from that.
Okay, so that's really interesting. So you're starting with the end point of being the person who's actually going to be using that space, as opposed to thinking about just some generic idea that you think, oh, it would be nice to have this kind of design, or it'd be nice to have these kind of finishes. You're actually thinking about how the person is going to interact with the space, which leads to your design decisions. Is that correct?
Correct. Yeah. So before working with property investors, I used to work with residential customer, mid to high-end projects, and then with every project, you're meant to have a brief at the beginning of the project and to understand their needs. So let's say if you have a family of 4 and they need help with their project, let's say, and then you'll design something for them, which is unique for them. Now, in the HMO market, and then depending on who's going to be a tenant, either going to be a student or a professional and so on. And then we'll sit down and then understand their needs. And then you'll go backwards from that. Let's say, just to give an example, a professional will need, for this size room, will need maybe a small single bed or a small double, sorry. And that'll be the largest item in the room, and that will dictate, okay, which bedside cabinets and so on, because that's important, because according to those, then you're going to have PowerPoints on the wall. And then you need to know early on in the process, when electrician comes on site, just to indicate where that's going to be located based on what you design. So I go a week backwards, I take the brief and then specified some goods, what you're going to have within a budget. And then we go back to technical drawings, space planning, 3D, and so on. So it's almost like you'll be working out your GDV when you're doing your project, but also this type of details will affect how fast these units are going to rent, how much you can rent for. Obviously, we try to push those numbers by creating something which is specially designed for that consumer.
So it seems like there's two elements to this. There's one of them which is the practical side of the design. So in other words, like you say, where the bed is going to be placed in the room, how many sockets there are, so that you can have bedside tables, you can have enough sockets for a laptop, a television, etc. Where's the furniture going to be placed? But then also the second level is how it's going to look. How it's going to feel, what colors you're going to use, what fabrics, what materials are going to use to create that finalized design. And I often see people focusing on the first element, which is the practical side of it, and perhaps their architect might produce plans which show the bed in situ and the wardrobe and so on, and how the doors are going to open, and make sure there's enough space for the door to be able to open fully, and not bang on any furniture, and the windows to work. The practical side is often addressed fairly clearly with an architect, but I often see less emphasis placed on the aesthetic side. Now, with an HMO that you might be investing in for the next 10 to 15 years, to what degree can your designs really last for that length of time? And also, what if the market changes? How do you address that potential that this property that you might design for students might end up being a professional HMO?
Well, obviously, there are certain aspects you can play with just to accommodate both markets, I'd say, yeah. But this aspect will attract more people to start with. So every time you'll have a listing, and then if you stand out for a crowd, obviously it's going to rent a lot faster. So time transfers into money, and usually the furniture or the items that you would supply, obviously they need to be long lasting. So just like you said, at least I'd say 10 years. So the elements which you'll bring in and then will be a bit more specific or be a bit more personalized will be, let's say, color paint or artwork and things like that. So not necessarily things that you wouldn't be able to change 5 years down the line. Yeah. So the furniture will accommodate both, I'd say, and that's the space. As the space requires, you'll have as much as possible, and then to create that, to have that unit, and then to make it really homely. And just the idea is, the way we look at things is to make that space like a home, not just a room that you'll go and sleep. And then there's so many elements we can play with, like colors, the right kind of lighting, if it's warm, if it's cold, and so that makes such a big difference. Natural light, where's it coming from, where the desk is going to be located, and so on. So it is the person living there. The idea is to feel like home, and then be proud of them being there. And this transfers into your type of unit being recommended, mostly. And then if you're trying to build a brand, that's stand as well is a good place to be recommended from. So because you'll have a lot of time, people living in HMOs, they have friends coming over, and then I've been in a situation when I have tenants being there, and then asking the investors, okay, if you ever do another one, let me know, because I want to be living in one of yours, So that transfers into this.
I think that's a really good point, because I think for when you're building a brand, when you're building a business, you want to be different. You want to show what your USP is. Now, I think that in HMOs, there's lots of different USPs. Some people have great design that's very kind of industrial or funky. Other people do more kind of co-living type spaces. Other people have perhaps more basic HMOs, but actually the maintenance and the operation is very, very slick. So I think it depends what your brand stands for when you're developing your portfolio. I think the other thing is, for a lot of people who are developing a portfolio, they might start off thinking, well, I'm only going to do one or two. And then they end up doing a third and a fourth and a fifth, and they kind of become accidental HMO landlords because they think, well, this is an easy way to create additional units of accommodation. The demand is there. Why don't I just do some more? And they end up building a much bigger portfolio than they maybe originally intended even to do. But the problem with that is when it's accidental, there's no intention behind it, and it can become a little bit bitty. And I think sometimes then creating or understanding what your brand is even harder because you've done it in a very sort of piecemeal way. So what advice would you give to somebody who's maybe on their first or second HMO, is thinking about developing their portfolio, or has developed it in a rather haphazard way and is now looking at their portfolio and thinking, I'd really like to bring some element of design to show that all these HMOs that I own are in the same business. They are effectively related to one another because I own them, or my company owns them. But it's kind of I'm doing it backwards now because I should have thought about this beforehand, but I didn't. Now I'm looking backwards and looking at them and thinking, no one would know that they were all part of my brand.
Yeah. First of all, it is to have someone on board, part of the team, as early as possible. So if they have an architect and then they'll provide a set of drawings, obviously that's fine, but that's not going to give you the full picture of what you're going to have eventually. And ideally is to sit down together and then to create a plan, a vision, let's say 5 years, 10 years, what you want to build. Okay. And if you want to have want to build a portfolio for, let's say, professionals, and then you create a certain standard, first you're going to be looking at, okay, a minimum size room or type property, which you're going to be going forward. So you can't really have something now, let's say, which is like, you'll have a property which decent sized rooms or very quite large as well. And then next one, it'll be doing some very small rooms. So that's one important factor. First is the type of property, the type of room, and so on. So it has to be consistent. So because once you create each room, and then also you have tenants which will be wanted to go from one to the other, that space requirement is important. So that's one thing. And then first, it's the way we usually work is like take the process over from the architects and then work with DWG drawings and then importing our software and then make those tweaks like according to their needs, and then making sure that all the details are met early on in the process. So first we do quite a few steps in the process. We do like first is space planning. We go through some changes, some alterations. We move walls a bit, see where the and suites are going to be located, and desk and all the large items in the rooms, communal areas, and so on. And then we go through 3D. We do realistic renders. We do technical drawings, plans, elevations, service drawings for the building team, and also do realistic renders. Together with mood boards and specification and even a shopping cart at the end. So by the time the investor will start the project, the build, they'll have a clear understanding what they're going to achieve. And then this is without even the builders being on site, without even them starting. So having that clarity early on, I think is very important. And then going forward to the second or third and so on, that something that you can easily replicate. Obviously, you can do some alteration to your second property, and depending on the type of property, which might be, and maybe you want to have elements which you will, I don't know, link to that type of property or the area. but you can find certain elements which are part of your brand, which you can replicate throughout. So people, when they see it listed, okay, I've seen this before, or I've seen this, and then it's something that will recognize, it's either through logo or colors or patterns and things like that, or through customer care or service. It's I think there's so many elements which are important as an investor to start building a brand and then making sure they have a clear plan going forward.
Just one second, Gabriel. So Gabriel, you've got some great ideas there about trying to build that brand and to keep that that sense of it's not exactly uniformity, but it's a sense of elements that people would then recognize as being HMOs that you have developed, or that in your sense that a customer has developed. And as you say, there's a great feeling when, as an HMO investor, you have somebody who comes into a property and it's full, and they say, "I'd love to rent a room from you because I really like the look of your HMOs." But of course, properties are all different shapes and sizes, aren't they? And wouldn't it be wonderful if we could find an ideal property and then just use that as a kind of cookie cutter approach, and we could replicate it over and over and over again? Now, in certain areas of the country, it is possible, and certainly where I invest, we've been very lucky that we have a lot of 3-bedroom, large Victorian properties which make fantastic HMOs, whether 5, 6, or 7, or even bigger beds. They've got big size rooms. They've got high ceilings. They're very spacious. The rooms have an element of almost separation, even though they might be next door to one another, but they feel fairly separate because you've got thick walls in between them, which of course you can add extra insulation if you want to. And there's a sense in which, although it's one house, one property, a lot of the tenants, because of the size of their rooms, have quite individual little pods, if you like, that they're kind of existing in as well as using the communal space. But how do you do that if you're investing somewhere where maybe there isn't that kind of stock of housing, and where the rooms are not even sizes? How can you still develop that kind of idea of a brand where your quality standards and so on are still uniform, but you may have a lot of different types of properties that you're having to develop?
So working with small spaces, it's this one you have to get creative. Now, if you have a large open space, let's say in a residential property, and then the customer wants this, and the other, that's the easy way of looking at things, because they have this large space, it can do whatever, and then you might be in that position and say, okay, we need to do something with space because we can't leave it unused. So, for example, in Japan, like, space is a premium. Yeah. So this, you have to be creative, all type of solutions. So then obviously you still will start with like space planning and making sure that you'll meet all those needs that the tenant will want. But then you add another layer. So by doing your 3D drawings or customized units or bed and so, or desk or different type of storage, which you wouldn't find like off the shelf, and then going with finishes or the right lighting or the right fabrics, then in a way you're cheating the eye, or you're by creating something new. It's still part of your brand. Let's say 2 of the rooms will have the right size, but the other 3 will be smaller and then unusual shapes. Some might find this interesting. I might find, okay, this is unusual. I mean, sometimes you have to embrace things that you can't really hide, and then make a feature out of those. So you still have a few elements, as long as the functionality is met, and then you give a good space for that tenant to use. Then there's so much variation, so many things, creative things that can work with the right lighting, the color, the right color walls or ceilings or natural light you can work with, still to create a beautiful space to live in. So I wouldn't say that something unusual, something quirky, like will be something stopped in creating a brand. Like I said, I've been in many situations when the customer had like a pillar in the middle of the room. So it's, what do we do with this? You can't take it down. So let's embrace it, make something nice out of it, and then rather than hide it, it's there. Obviously, everybody's going to see it. Let's make something that's be nice to look at, and then that's the way I see things of, let's say, old chimney breast, and then you have the chimney stack there. Let's do something interesting with it. Like have some brick wall or things like that, and then let's do something amazing, with that room. And then even if it's small, it doesn't matter, it's as long as something that attracts the eye, and then it's still part of that brand, is consistent throughout the property.
I really like that idea. I think that's actually really quite important when you're developing property, that in order to reduce your expenditure, you have got to be creative, haven't you, about how you use the space. You've got to be able to say, well, that wall's in a really awkward place, but I don't really want to knock it down and have to build a new one. What can we do with it? How can we make it, rather than a problem, how can we make it a feature? How can we do something with it? Maybe with, as you say, with lighting or mirrors or good textures, we can actually make this a feature wall rather than a problem wall. Yeah. And I think that's true in a lot of different properties where you find that they may meet minimum standards. You might have the minimum room sizes, etc. But actually, there's very little else to kind of sell it to you, because aesthetically it might not be that great. It might be a fairly boring house in other in other ways, and so you have to be creative. And I think as property developers, we have to have so many skills, don't we? Not all of us are particularly creative, so that's of course where you come in.
Yeah, so this is where it comes really important. Like you said, there are various type HMOs, and then if you only stop at that point of hiding a wall, or like you have like a chimney breast, a chimney stack like that, you want to just hide it and then have a bed there and that's it. Obviously, you're stopping too short. You're not going all the way, and then it's obviously everybody's going to see it, and then it's not something that is there, but what can I do? I'm going to have it anyway. So, but there are so many ways of embracing that and make it really something really interesting. There's like so many ways, and if you open suggestions, and then I came up to all sort of solutions, which it was like, I never thought of doing this, and then you can't really rely on, let's say, the builder suggested something, because they are there just to implement your vision. And then usually the architect will stop at one point, but wouldn't go all the way, because frankly, they're not paid to do the interior design, or they just follow some guidance, and then just help you go through planning and so on. But we need to come in early on in the process just to make sure that everything is the right position and so on, and then it serves the tenant.
Now, Gabriel, you don't have an English accent, so I'm assuming you are from somewhere other than the UK.
Yeah.
So when did you first come to the UK, and why?
Yeah, I first came in the UK in 2014. I'm originally from Romania. So I was doing all kind of things, like with my background, in interior design and some graphic as well, but always had a passion for property. So I had so I've been involved in all types of renovation projects, and having coming in the UK as well, has to prove myself in a way, because in UK you'll be asked, okay, where'd you work here? So I work with kitchen manufacturers, bathrooms, and then I worked my way up, and then working eventually with mid to high-end ones, Italians and Germans as well. But all the time I've been involved in all types of renovation projects. So I came just to experience the culture and then work in a different way. And then I had friends and some family which were here. Asked them around. It felt like a good place to be, and here I am today and work with property investors. And next step is for us to have our own projects in premium HMOs, and then to raise the standard of co-living.
Amazing, amazing. Well, you've got a real vision for your own business, which is great. I'd like to know a bit more about some of the projects you've done, though. And this is not always maybe an easy question. I want to start by asking you, where did a project go wrong? What happened, and how did you pull it round?
Yeah, sometimes where they go wrong is one of the first steps in our process is for us to take drawing from the architect, which we call it DWG drawings, and then we put it in my software and then start building from there in 3D and so on. But sometimes we realize that the builder starts working on site, and then we realize that something is not on my drawings. So I usually go on site and then start moving things around. For example, like electrical points or the layout of the bathroom is not correct because we have a wall there which is not shown. So we have to make changes on site as we speak, take measurements, and then do alteration of internal configuration as well. But I wouldn't say it goes wrong all the way, because as soon as you catch those say early on in the process, then you adjust accordingly. There are always ways around. But obviously it's ideal to see these things as early as possible and then to make changes accordingly, because you don't want to start placing order for the goods or for bathrooms without knowing exactly if they're going to fit inside. Because I pay a lot of attention to which shower tray going to have, what's the size, where going to be positioned, which kind of shower set, and then lighting, where they're going to go, and so on. So a bit of miscommunication before, let's say, the architect's drawings, possibly, and then going forward what we're going to implement. This has to be really clear for the builder as well, for the investor. Sometimes when you have items not being delivered on site, adds more delays for the projects. But there are always ways around. It's always how you embrace those things. One way or the other, you have to finish the project. So
yes,
I'm used to unexpected things that are happening on site. Property, it's such a field that you're always going to have this, no matter what. It's not if, it's when. So.
Well, there's a maxim, isn't there, in the trade, which is measure twice, cut once.
Yeah.
In other words, always do your measuring twice before you decide what you're going to cut, because you could make a mistake in the measuring of that particular item. So, that's a very good maxim, I think, to hold by. Sure. And so problems can arise. You understand how to deal with those problems. That's from your experience. What about when a project has gone off the rails? Can you tell me of a time when you've done a project where it didn't quite go to plan, and what happened?
When projects that don't go to plan is especially when the investor is trying to cut corners. Sometimes, for example, using different trades for different services, like to be done, like for I don't know, one decorating team, or a builder's going to do this or that, and then it's putting all this together. So usually you're not solving a problem; you are adding more issues to the project. You need to have like a clear understanding who's doing what, and ideally to have just one team who's sorting everything. So I had a project when when this happened, like when you have all kind of teams and then they all overlapping one another, and then not to mention that he wasn't able to save a cost, but he is to add more time to the project, and obviously time is money. So making sure that the power team is strong, and then from the very beginning they know what they're doing, everyone. Hello. Yeah, so
sorry, that's my cat. She loves to jump up when I'm recording podcasts.
Yeah,
I had to get rid of her. Sorry,
no
Gabriel,
problem.
carry on.
I know how it's like. I have a cat as well. Yeah, so and then it's on that situation, obviously it was a bit too late to engage with another builder and take it over, but it was a lesson learned for that investor that it needs to be done by one specialist builder, and then to cover everything, and that there's no miscommunication, then they have like a clear schedule for what's what. Otherwise it's gonna go wrong. It's just a matter of when, because let's say, for example, you have the trades doing the flooring, but they can't do in the same time as people doing the decorating, and they have different schedules and they have different jobs booked at the same time, and then it's adds to the time schedule, which is not ideal.
Okay, and what about a project that's gone really well, when you've been surprised at how well it's gone, your plans have all worked out, the investor's been easy to work with, the builder's been great? Tell us about a time when you did a really good project.
Okay, so great to have projects like this, obviously, but it's a combination of who the investor is, and then how is their approach to changes, to risk, and then how open they are for us to take over at one point, and without them being so involved. And obviously it's very important for them to have like a good power team in place. I'll say a good architect, a good building team which they have experience and with this type of conversions, and then it's a combined effort. You have at least 3 or 4 parties at that point which will be involved, and then not to have changes while during the project. I think it's important. So usually I would allow two site visits from my behalf. I'll go there quite early in the process, and then the builder takes over, and then probably decide on making sure that whatever I've drawn, it's exactly what's on site. And then I will decide on PowerPoints or maybe minor alterations going forward. So the builder was experienced and then we were on the same level when bringing ideas and small alteration on site. So we noticed right away that a few things have to be tweaked. And then we went room by room. And then within probably an hour and a half, we done all the changes, all the notes on site. So we had the notes from what I've done initially, my drawings, and then 3D drawings as well, with all the service drawings, which were meant to be implemented. But like I said, we had to make some certain changes on site. So the builder was really helpful towards that. And then what happened was that we communicated this with the investor, and then he took everything on board. He took my word, he took his word, and everything was implemented accordingly. And then going forward for the finished items, they just run. Everything went smoothly after. He simply went with what we recommended as well. He had some experience, but he took our experience on board, and then just embrace it. So that's the ideal scenario. When you have a good architect, like I said, you might have a few changes on site once you strip the whole house, and then you realize one thing wasn't the right position and so on. But that's quite common. Then you need to have like a builder which is open to ideas, and then and possibly to bring his own suggestion, which I'm open to as well. There might be some technical aspects which I'm not be aware of, and then but obviously I'll take that on board. And then also to be an investor to take those suggestions from myself or the builder, and then to implement that as well. Otherwise, if you do changes at that point, again, that adds to the timeline.
Yes, I can completely relate to that. That's been very much my own experience. I've had some great projects that have gone really well. And it's smooth. Okay, you're always going to have some difficulties in any project. There's going to be some things that's unforeseen that you didn't know was going to happen. But I think on the whole, if the project's on time and on budget, you feel much more confident that when those changes do come, you can address them, you can fix them, you can move on, and you get the project basically completed at a time. But I've had a couple of projects where, for example, the builder has taken on too much additional work and has then gone off site for a number of weeks, or has left some of his subbies on the site to do the work, but they don't really know what they're doing. They are slow, and you go back down to the project to do a visit, and a few weeks later, and you think actually no progress has been made. And as an investor, of course, that's the worst feeling to have, is to think your hard-earned money is going into this project and the builders are not getting on with it. You're obviously losing money because you now can't rent out that property at the date and time when you thought you could. So it becomes very stressful for everybody concerned. And I think nowadays, with the cost of borrowing having gone up, if you're on a bridge, it's phenomenally expensive. So time delivery is absolutely critical. I think 5 or 6 years ago, where you could get reasonably priced finance, you could maybe cope with a couple of months or two of overrun, and it didn't matter so much. But these days, it's absolutely vital to be hitting those deadlines on time because of the cost of the finance at the end of the day.
Yeah. Not only that, the finance and you not being able to rent it as fast as possible. That's why planning is key. So I would have people coming to me quite late in the process, which this is so many times overlooked, and they don't know the importance of, because what we do is basically we put something together. We start with space planning, and then a lot of times we propose something and we go through some changes. Then you go to designing the kitchens, designing the bathrooms, and any items that you might have in all your rooms, bespoke items. And then you go to specification. And then within a budget, we actually put something together, a shopping cart for each item. So basically, by the time you'll start the project, you'll have a clear understanding and costing for each room, for the kitchen, for the bathroom, and everything. So that means that it leaves less room for questions, for mistakes, and then so on. The project itself, it's detailed and complicated. So why add more layers to this when you can do it so early in the process? Interior design is the art and science to understand people's behavior and then create functional spaces within a building that are aesthetically pleasing. And unfortunately, a lot of people think that interior design is just the finished items at the end, which is totally not. So it has to function first before being pretty, like put it in a short sentence. So obviously you'll have drawings from the architect, but I've seen, not this big, but I've seen projects which I've been and visited, and then they're finished. But I've seen issues with the layout, toilet being placed in the wrong position, and then the builder wouldn't know, the owner wouldn't care, just place it as shown on the plan. The investor didn't know much either. Okay, if they put it there, probably it's right. So my background, like I'm trying to maximize every single corner. If I see 20 centimeters, 30 centimeters not being used, for me, that's that space which could have been avoided easily early on in the process, especially when we're dealing with a room which is, 10 square meters. You have to make sure that every single space is utilized to its full potential. Otherwise, it will be too late in the process when you get to the finished items to do any changes then.
Yeah, and I think that's a really valuable point, because you're right, these are not big rooms and people are using them as their main living accommodation. And, often when I stay in a hotel room, which usually are a little bit bigger perhaps than a standard 10-meter squared, you're probably looking at maybe 15-meter squared, and they've got an ensuite at one end, and then they've got the double bed and television on the wall and so on. But it all looks extremely well designed, and I think from there's been a lot of work and a lot of research that's gone into hotel design, so that people can use those rooms, that they're robust, that they last well, that the furniture is good quality, that it's fit for purpose, and that it can be cleaned very, very regularly and turned over very, very regularly. Usually in an HMO room, you don't have such high levels of turnover as you would in a hotel room. But I think you're absolutely right that if you don't spend time thinking about how you can use every spare inch, you're going to be missing some of the benefits of having that space. And the other thing that I would also say is that you can use the walls. So, for example, in a couple of our HMO rooms where they're a bit smaller, we've used fold-down desks so that the tenant can use the desk during the day, but then in the evening, if they want to, they can fold it down, fold up the chair, and that just gives them a bit more space. And I think it's having those kind of creative ideas that some people are really good at, and they're prepared to go and research and find out, and other people, they're an investor. They want somebody else to do that work. So, Gabriel, if somebody wanted to work with you, let's say they listened to the podcast and thought, he's just the man I need for my next project. How would somebody get in touch with you, and how would they commission your services?
Yeah, so we can get in touch on Instagram, on Facebook, LinkedIn as well, as my name, Gabriel Avramoaica, and we have a website as well, presenting what we do. And then ideally we'll have like a initial conversation just to understand their needs, and then see how can benefit. But yeah, we're on all these socials and website as well.
Great. And just tell us, in terms of the geographic area that you work in, do you work across the UK, or are you specific to a particular part of the UK at the moment?
Yeah, we work throughout the UK, because a lot of the projects we can do remotely, and then if the site visits are needed, so we have something in place that they have. Either we go ourselves if the project is quite a large project, either we organize something like just to do a site survey for us. But we're based in Milton Keynes, and a lot of times if it's within a certain radius, we'll do site visits. Usually 2 or 3 will be enough for the project. Yeah. So it's a mixture.
Great, excellent. Well, that's fantastic. Well, I think it's very inspiring to listen to you, because you've clearly got a passion for what you do, combining your background of industrial design, space design, and interiors, and thinking about those different layers in an HMO. And I think as we move forward, the HMO landscape is very interesting. It's always presenting challenges and changes. And I think that the more that we can offer good quality accommodation to tenants, the better, to improve the stock of housing that's out there, and to improve the experience for tenants as well. And as you rightly said at the very beginning, this is about tenant-led design. It's about customer-led design. And that's a really important part to be thinking in the way that we're creating homes for people, because these homes will be in use for many, many years to come. So the better you get the design in at the beginning, the more cost effective it will be long term.
Yeah, it's a win-win situation really, because if you design it for them, and then if it's, instead of you waiting 5 weeks to let all the rooms out, and then if you design something which is above average or a lot higher, well, I can assure you that those rooms will go faster, even if you're asking a bit more, because there is demand out there for such a product, and that is a win-win situation. It's just for the tenant, obviously, and then for you as an investor.
Yeah, fantastic. Well, that's what we like to hear, is a win-win situation.
Yeah, correct.
So fantastic. Well, listen, Gabriel, thank you so much for being here today. It's been really good to understand what you do, how you serve the investor population, people who are looking in properties all over. I know it isn't just HMOs, but you do other projects as well. We'll put your links in the notes to the podcast as well. So if there are people out there who are listening who'd like to get in touch with you and find out a bit more about your services and what you can offer, they can obviously come directly to you. But I'd like to say a massive thank you to you for being here today. It's been really interesting talking to you and learning about the design-led, sort of space-led solutions that you offer, and good luck in the next few years in your business.
Thanks so much, Wendy. Thanks for having me. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you. Thank you for listening to the HMO Success Podcast. If you'd like to know more about how you can create a profitable HMO business, please visit our website, hmosuccess.co.uk, to find out more. We have plenty of free tools and information for you there, and also on our Facebook group, The Ultimate HMO Success System. We look forward to connecting with you very soon. Thanks for listening.